Hey, you guys. Friday again. Time for a movie retrospective. This week, the vote was almost unanimous. This got way, way more votes than any of the other ones. This is the 1988 Tim Burton classic, Beetlejuice.
Yeah, it's an old classic one.
You know what's crazy about this is that I had actually put this, because this movie's been in the queue for a really long time. And I put it in the poll a week or two ago. And then it so happened that after I'd already put it in the poll and after it looked like it was going to win, I noticed that Oliver Harper had also done a retrospective on Beetlejuice. Yeah. So I didn't do that on purpose. I'm not riding on his coattails or anything. I was just that's the movie we're going to do. And just so happens that he did one on it as well. But that's okay. We can all do movies.
I think this is the first Tim Burton movie I've ever seen. I think it was.
Yeah. Well, it was only his second
Oh, wait a minute. He did Batman, though, didn't he? The very first one, right?
No, yeah, but Batman came out after this.
It was after this. That's what I thought. Okay,
yeah.
Yes, I think this was the first one. Yeah, pretty sure.
Well, this was only his second movie. Okay. His first movie was, his first full-length movie, rather, was Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Okay. And then he got this movie, on the strength of that. And then Batman came out the year after this.
Well, I saw Pee-wee's Big Adventure. I didn't know he did that. So I guess this isn't the first movie. I saw his first movie, Pee-wee.
I did too, but I think I saw it after this one.
Okay, I saw Pee-wee. I didn't know that was Tim Burton.
Because I saw this in the theater, and Pee-wee's Big Adventure I didn't see until later on cable.
I'm not a huge Tim Burton fan. For me, I think he's only got 5 real good movies. 4 or 5.
Yeah, his early ones are easily his best ones. I mean, after a while he started...
His best one was Mars Attacks. I think that was his best
one.
Well,
nobody's going to argue with you about that, I don't think.
Mars Attacks blew me away. That one really stands the test of time. This is a good one, though, too. It's all right.
This is probably my favorite one. Either this one or Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah.
You know what's crazy about this movie? I was thinking about it today because I've seen this movie a zillion times. I didn't even have to watch it again for this retrospective because I have the whole thing memorized because I've seen it billions of times. The weird thing about this is that in 1988, the year this came out, I was at the movies. I'm pretty sure I was seeing Who Framed Roger Rabbit, I think, because that came out the same year. And I remember seeing that in the theater. Now, before that movie started, there was a trailer for Beetlejuice. And I did not believe that it was a real movie. Yeah. Well, I mean, I was like, are they kidding? That's a real movie? I didn't think that a big studio would do a movie that weird looking with what looked like a sympathetic goth character in it. Because like I said, you have to think this is 1988. Okay.
Well, it's because of who Tim Burton was.
Well, yeah, but it's we didn't know that yet. Yeah. Because like I said, Pee-wee's Big Adventure was his first full-length movie. And he wasn't really on my radar up until then because I hadn't seen that.
I didn't even know that was a Tim Burton movie.
Yeah, it was.
It doesn't even look like a Tim Burton movie. Didn't even feel like one.
Well, because
I'd have to go back and look at it again, but you know what I mean. I didn't make that connection.
I mean, he had made shorts and stuff, and he was a Disney animator, obviously, before he became a film director. He had done Frankenweenie and stuff, but so you could tell that he was really into old creepy old horror movies. But they gave him Pee-wee's Big Adventure, I guess, just because it was wacky. But he had to kind of go with the aesthetic of Pee-wee's show, which was very popular at the time. So I guess they didn't really trust him enough to have him do his own vision with it because it had to kind of stay within the Pee-wee world. Mm. You know what I mean? So he was that was somebody else's IP. But I find it really interesting that a movie as weird as Beetlejuice not only got made in 1988, but was actually really a big mainstream success. You know what I mean? It made tons of money.
I gotta admit, when it first came out and I saw it, I didn't like it. The only thing I liked about it was Winona Ryder. I thought she was cute as shit.
She is cute as shit.
I didn't even know who that was. I was just saying, man, that's a cute girl.
She was very, very young in this too.
Yeah. I was only 2 years older than
I was 16 when this movie came out.
Yeah, so I was maybe 2 or 3 years older. But it was just kind of girls I was dating in high school.
Well, and like I said, it's really cool because I feel in the 80s, we've talked about this before, you would see punk and goth characters like in movies sometimes, but they would usually be villains or they,
they put them in negative light,
Yeah, so I think this was the first time that I actually saw a girl that actually looked like a real goth chick.
Yeah.
That sort of acted like a real goth chick. Yep. I mean, she wasn't a bad guy. She was actually like a lovely person.
Yeah.
And just like a regular person.
Yep.
And I think that's the only time that's the first time that I'd seen that, and it blew my fucking mind.
Back in these days, you saw goth girls, they were just hanging out at Denny's most of the time, depending on where you were. When they were that age. Because they weren't old enough to get into the clubs.
You couldn't get in the clubs.
Couldn't get in the clubs. They just hung out at Denny's. Yeah. Be a bunch of them.
But yeah, so the interesting thing about this book, and this is like how, my book review show and shit like that, this is how this all like synergizes. What I didn't realize until I reviewed a novel by a dude named Michael McDowell, he's passed away since, but he was like a big horror writer. Like he wrote like a lot of like pulp horror novels, like paperback originals and stuff, like back in the 80s and 90s. Mm. He actually wrote the original screen treatment of Beetlejuice. And the script had kind of been like, going around Hollywood because it was like super weird and everybody's like, well, this is fucking crazy. But interestingly, his first screenplay was not a comedy. It was like way, way, way darker. Like it did have the thing about, the couple and then they get killed in a car accident. And then, it did have a Beetlejuice character. But in his original treatment, Beetlejuice was actually like an evil, like a murderer, like a rapist, and he was like a demon. He had like wings and shit.
I would have liked it better, I think, if it was like that. I thought it was too silly when I first saw it. You know what I mean? I wanted it to have a little bit of a harder edge. But like I said, it was how old I was at the time and what my expectations were at the time. You know what I mean? Over time, the movie kind of grew on me.
It's kind of one of those weird movies, I guess you could say, kind of like The Frighteners or something like that, where it's like, it's not a horror movie, but it's not straight up a comedy either, because it does have like a lot of horror elements to it, and it's kind of like has a lot of drama elements to it, and it's funny too, but it's like, you can't really place it in one category.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they just don't make enough movies like that, I feel
kind of like Death Becomes Her. Kind of a tune.
Yeah, like it's kind of like a black comedy, I guess.
It's kind of mainstream, but it had weird goth elements. To me, it was a little bit too much of everything. I wanted it to decide on what kind of movie it was. I think I would have liked it better if the tone. This is back in those days. Like I like it now, but back in those days, had it been a little bit more like Evil Dead, I would have liked it more.
Yeah.
Which that's comedy horror. You know what I mean?
Right.
But. It was. I remember thinking at the time that it was like overly family friendly.
It is, but it's kind. Like I said, it's one of those cool movies that they didn't really, even back then, they didn't make a lot of them like this. That were, you could absolutely take your kids to see this movie, but it also had like really, really kind of.
It had adult humor.
It had like adult humor and it had like a lot of dark humor in it as well. Yeah. And a lot of it was about death and suicide and shit like that. But it was almost kind of like, and I'm not sure if there were that many movies, like, and I guess why Tim Burton became so famous was because he was kind of instrumental in making this whole goth aesthetic, like making it approachable and making it like friendly, you know what I mean? Because like prior to that, when you had goths and punks in movies, they were almost always bad guys or it was horror movies.
Yeah.
So this was kind of the first movie that made it like it was, cuddly.
Well, it was more closer to the reality than it was, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's one thing that used to always like kind of make me mad, like in a lot of 80s movies, as much as I love them, was that, I mean, you'd see shit like, I'm trying to think of, like, Return of the Living Dead or, what was the one with Angela in it? Now I can't remember what it's called, but it had like Stigmata Martyr, had the Bauhaus song in it and everything. Yeah. It always seems like every time they had a character like that, she was always like a bad guy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, somebody who's in a bunch of trouble and shit. God kids were good kids.
That's what I mean. Yeah. It's like, and that was like not my experience. Yeah. I said usually like all the shitty like people that were always getting in trouble were like the jocks and shit.
Yeah, yeah, they were the ones doing all the drugs.
I mean, the goths were at home like reading Oscar Wilde and shit. I mean, in my experience,
drinking coffee at the fucking counter at
right.
At fucking Denny's.
Pretty much. college.
Waiting to get old enough to get into the club.
Yeah, that's essentially what we were all doing. We were just like hanging out, reading books, and listening to music in our room. That's what we were doing.
Go down by the riverside, maybe fucking, with the jam box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of like that they portrayed her. And like I said, I think when I was 16 years old, it was really cool to see that, because I felt like prior to that, everyone just kind of thought you were a weirdo. But now, like, everyone just kind of like, they're like, oh, okay. So she's just like a regular person. Because, I mean, she's not only just a regular, she's like the really kind of the best person in the movie, because she's the person that...
She was like the hottest one.
Well, she was the hottest one, but also she was the only one at first that could see the Maitlands, that could see the ghosts, because she was like more open to experience than her horrible like parents. Her parents weren't terrible people. They were just like really self-absorbed, I guess. Yeah. And like just worried about their status and whatnot.
They were typical upper middle class.
Yeah. So it was just kind of like that. They weren't like mean to her or anything like that, but it was just they were kind of neglectful.
They were worried about what the Joneses were thinking.
Right, and they didn't really like get what like her deal or anything, but it's like, so the fact that she, comes to this house and, finds surrogate parents really like in the ghosts. And also, like I said, I like that it kind of made death seem like not so scary, or it almost had like an anti-suicide message too, because, Lydia, she was kind of like suicidal for a time because she was very isolated. She wasn't, her parents weren't giving her a lot of attention and things like that. And then once she meets the Maitlands, who are dead in the house, she wants to die to join them. But I think they were able to show like very effectively, but also in kind of a fun way, that the two of them being dead, it's like they had all kind of fucking problems too. And like death was like this big like bureaucracy and shit like that.
What's funny is at the time that I saw it, I was maybe a year out of high school. Most of the stuff you're talking about, those angles, were beyond me then. I wasn't old enough to really appreciate that. You really don't really get you don't really understand the full message until you're really like in your late 20s, early 30s. Then you start understanding the messages in this movies, like what you're talking about. Death being a bureaucracy. I really didn't see into that. You know what I mean? At the time, I couldn't see that deeply into the message.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was a kid, so it's just, I was looking at it just superficially. I was like, why isn't this more scary? You know what I mean? But that's what guys are, you know what I mean? At that age, But over time, I kind of grasped what the deeper meanings of some of these messages were,
I was reading like an article about this movie, and I kind of laughed about it because it was basically saying, I think it was on Gizmodo or something, where it was saying that one of the biggest villains of this movie is like modern design, because there's like a really big thing where, the Maitlands are very like, old fashioned. You know what I mean? They're very country. They're like, they're supposed to be, I guess it's supposed to be Connecticut. It was actually shot in Vermont, close enough. And they like very old things, very simple things, antiques and things like that. And then when the Dietzes move in, they just like...
They want to tear everything out of
They tear everything out, and like they put like all these like crazy sculptures. I will admit, I liked the house either way. Like, I'm not, a big like... Because I like old school looking shit, but I liked the modern shit too. Yeah, but you know what? All the stuff that the modern stuff that they put in there did not age well. That shit was only really, that was really hip back in the late 80s. You look at, I mean, the only thing that was missing was the damn Patrick Nagel, because that was fucking, that had already gone out of style by the time fucking. Well, yeah, because I feel like, because that was like more early to mid 80s, because like Duran were putting. Yeah, but what they were putting in there was basically like 1988's version of Patrick Nagel paintings. Yeah. So, that shit didn't age well either. But it really looked like damn fucking retail decorations like from Halston and fucking Chanel for the time. That was the fucking color palettes and the design that retail was going for. I mean, it was supposed to be like New York and fucking sophisticated. Yeah, it was supposed to be like avant-garde, because that's kind of like what what Lydia's stepmom's thing was she was supposed to be. Yeah. But the joke in the movie was that nobody wanted to buy her sculptures because they were terrible and ugly. Even though I thought they were kind of cool, but you know what I mean? It's like, but I liked the house, the old way too. So I kind of like, But yeah, so just the fact that the Dietzes come in and just like bulldoze over everything that the Maitlands had spent their life building, and like, it was this old house and stuff.
And it was almost like a Victorian house.
Yeah.
So, it was totally the opposite of the way they had decorated it in the inside.
Yeah.
Like, if you like that kind of shit, why the hell are you buying that house?
That's kind of one thing that always bothered me about that movie. I'm like, why didn't you just buy one that was already kind of...
Why don't you buy a modern apartment?
Or why don't you just have one built, like, to your specifications?
Right.
Because I'm sure that, like, the land is much cheaper, like, where, because they were coming from New York City.
Yeah, that's kind of dumb to buy a Victorian and then just modernize it.
And then just tear it all up. Yeah, it's like if you're going to buy a Victorian, it's because you like that architecture and you want to,
and
restore it.
Good luck fucking with your fucking central heating and air.
Yeah, well, they didn't really think about that back then.
Can't air condition them and you can barely heat them.
But yeah, so as I was saying before, Michael McDowell, who wrote the original version of this, he also wrote the novel The Elementals, among many other things, which I reviewed a few weeks ago on my Tomes of Terror show. So originally his script was much more like a horror movie. Like, the Maitlands did die in a car accident at the beginning, but it was like a super graphic like car accident, like her arm fell off and like her was torn off and all this other kind of shit, which they kind of left in because I think after they're killed in the accident, because they don't like realize that they're dead yet, and then they come back to the house and she says specifically, my arm is freezing, or my left arm is freezing, or something like that. That's a reference back to the original one where her arm was torn off, like in the accident. And like I said, Beetlejuice was not like, he actually wanted to kill the Dietzes rather than frightening them out of the house. And he also wanted to rape Lydia.
Damn.
Not just marry her, even though that's still pretty creepy and weird.
Yeah, even though I'm thinking that I would have liked the original concept, because I thought it had to have more horror in it at the time.
Yeah.
But like I said, way it ended up, that's good. It's a good movie. It's a classic movie.
I love this movie.
I appreciate it for what it is. But like I said, it's kind of like Death Becomes Her. It's just a little more fancy, with a cute girl in it.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's good.
But like I said, yeah. Well, this is probably one of my favorite movies ever. It's just because I like the audaciousness of it. I like that, Tim Burton, who had only made one feature film at this point, with Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which was like a huge success, which is why they gave him this one. I really love that he just went whole hog with it. Like, with his vision, he just did it exactly the way he wanted to do it. Apparently, they didn't give him much interference, which is crazy, considering how bizarre this movie is.
He must have had some dirt on somebody.
Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, the fact that they just pretty much let him do what he wanted, and it was, like, wildly successful. Because I am telling you how... When I saw the trailer for this, I legit did not think this was a real movie. I thought they were trolling me.
Yeah.
When I was 16. I was like, there's no way somebody made that movie. But they did, and it was awesome. And then, like, it made, like, all this fucking money with him doing exactly what he wanted to do. And it wasn't even... I mean... Okay, so in 1988, we didn't have CGI, really. We didn't have, like, all the fancy shit. But even for 1988, he wanted the special effects to look like... old monster movies, or like a kid's imagination, kind of. So it's like, it's not supposed to look real. Like all the sandworms, like that come out of the thing, like in the Dolly landscape when they go outside the house. The snake that Beetlejuice turns into, that's like stop motion. He's like, I very much wanted it to look, not fake like shitty, but fake like not supposed to be. Yeah. He didn't want it to look slick or real or anything like that. Because he wanted it to like homage like older movies, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And because he wanted it to have its own like aesthetic. And I think he did like a really, really cool, like a really good job. There's no CGI in that, I don't think. There's green screen, obviously, but all the monsters and all that other kind of stuff, that's all stop motion animation, and then the rest of it's all like makeup and stuff.
The acting's good in it too.
It's
crazy acting, but it's good.
I'm gonna say, like, I know a lot of people say, like, Michael Keaton. He's been in, like, so many movies, and it's, like, he's just such a great actor, and I've seen him, like, in so many, like, awesome movies. This might be his best role. This might be my favorite role of his. He's great as Batman, too, I'm gonna say. Now, he did well, the reason that he did so well in this was why he got Batman.
Yeah.
You know who they wanted for Beetlejuice originally? Sammy Davis Jr.
Yeah, okay. That might have worked.
Which might have worked.
Yeah. He was crazy.
I think Sam Kinison was also. I don't think that would have worked at all.
Not.
But yeah, I think they wanted Sammy Davis Jr. at first, and then Michael Keaton was. He wasn't a huge star at this point. I mean, he'd been in like Mr. Mom. He'd been in some other stuff by then, but he wasn't like an A-list name. No, I don't. He was
just an actor.
Yeah. He
was just one of them that was out there. I remember this time period. I'm gonna have to say though, man, my favorite one was Mars Attacks, and then under that I'd put Batman, and then maybe underneath Batman, The Nightmare Before Christmas, and then this one.
Yeah.
I would think. Yeah. I mean, this is one of his good ones. But I think as he went on, I think he got better. But the Batman with Michael Keaton, that was fucking fantastic. I love that movie.
I think that's a pretty universally loved movie. But I think this one is too. I don't think I've ever talked to anybody that did not like Beetlejuice. How can you not like Beetlejuice? It's delightful.
Now one movie I did want to see from Burton was I wanted to see that Superman with Nicolas Cage. He was making Superman. Did you know that?
Yeah, I heard of it.
I saw some of the stills and some of the stuff from that. It would have been fucking crazy. He had a crystalline suit.
Yeah.
A crystalline Superman suit. It was fucking weird, man. I wanted to see that one.
That's the thing. It reminds me of just such a time when Tim Burton was just like bursting with creativity. Because I feel like as he got older, and that happens a lot with like directors and stuff, once you kind of get older, you get burned out. He kind of got into like a little bit of, a rut with, because everybody's like, it's a Tim Burton movie. So you know what you expect.
You know it's going to have fucking Johnny Depp in it.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of glad that like this was pre the Johnny Depp era. You know what I mean?
Johnny Depp in every one of his movies.
Because Michael Keaton crushes this role. He got it exactly right. It's like I feel like because he had to come across. I mean, if you think about it from an objective standpoint, he had to come across as he basically wants to marry a 16-year-old girl, however old she was supposed to be in this movie. I think she was really 15 or 16 when she shot this. So he's basically taking a child bride, and he's also like kind of a pervert. Like he actually does grab like Gina Davis's crotch at some point, like, and makes a honking noise or whatnot. Or I think he does it to one of them.
He's a ghost.
So yeah, so he's kind of like he's shown to be like a pervert, but the fact that he's still like kind of lovable, even though he's sort of a bad guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then he's not like an irredeemable bad guy. He's more like a trickster, I guess. Because he does actually help, at the end when they do the seance and they don't know what they're doing, and then like they bring the Maitlands back and they start like decomposing, he does actually help them, although he helps them with the condition that Lydia will marry him.
He's an extra dimensional supernatural being. You can't hold him to the same fucking mores of a person. He's gonna do what he wants to do. He doesn't care if it's wrong. That's your opinion. He's gonna do what he wants. He's probably outside of space-time too, so he probably doesn't have an age as you know it.
I would think.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me
he's
too
whatever
because
age he wants to be.
Well, in the whole universe of this movie, because I mean, really, I'm glad that they never, because I know that they were talking about making a sequel to this. I mean, they had been talking about making a sequel to this like since it came out and was like a big success. But the sequel they wanted to do, I don't know if this is a joke or not, but the sequel they wanted to do was like Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian or some kind of shit, because Tim Burton thought it would be really funny to do like a Hawaiian surf movie, like with the whole overlaid with the goth aesthetic. He's like, because those two things don't go together, so it was really funny to him. But I'm really, really glad that they didn't do it, because I feel like this is a standalone movie. I know they did the cartoon series, which was actually quite good, although they changed some things, made like Lydia and Beetlejuice like friends that went on little adventures or whatever. But it's like I feel like even though there's like a huge expanded universe that you could explore, like the afterlife with like all the bureaucracy and like all the people looking different, like because some of the people that were dead, like in the afterlife, like the dude that was in the office that had got run over by a car or something like that, and he was still flat and he had like all the fucking tire tracks all over him, like the guy that got his head shrunk, the guy that died in bed of smoking and he was like all little and shriveled and ash and everything, and the magician's assistant that got cut in half, like all that kind of stuff. But then the Maitlands still looked the same. They looked the same as they had when they were alive. They could change their appearance, like, if they wanted to, because, like, when they pulled their face off and shit like that. But I wonder, I was, like, watching another analysis of this, and I wonder if they made them look the same because they were trying to show that they were, like, I don't know, like, the most pure characters, because they didn't have, like, any artifice, they didn't have any, like, bad in them, so nothing lingered on, like, their shittiness, because they didn't have any. Like, it didn't linger on after. Because, like I said, a lot of the other dead people, like, looked... Because look at what Beetlejuice looked like. He looked, like, fucking crazy with the fucking hair, and he had, like, mold all over his face, and, like, his teeth were all fucked up and everything like that.
He had mold on his face?
Yeah, it was like all that...
dark circles.
No, it was like, he did. It was like dark circles there, but it's like all around the outside, like his hair and stuff, that was all mold, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I forgot.
Yeah, so he was like all, like, crusty looking, kind of.
Yeah.
I also want to mention too, I think this might be, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, this might be the only PG movie, it's not PG-13, it's PG, that actually has the word fuck in it. And I don't know how, like, the MPA didn't get, because usually if it's PG-13, I think you can get by with one.
Maybe they missed it.
I think they missed it, and it's crazy that they missed it, because it's like, it's very clearly, you know, Beetlejuice standing up there going, nice fucking model. And then grabbing his fucking crotch.
I remember hearing something that there's a documentary about the rating system that kind of came out a couple of years back, and they said there's a lot of arbitrariness and politics involved in the ratings. And it's not a fucking exact science.
Well, of course not. I mean, anything that's, you know, has to do with how humans perceive things is gonna have, like, differences, because some people, like, you know, I can watch a horror movie and think it's not that gory, but if somebody is, like, not really into horror movies or doesn't really watch them or whatever, they might think, like, something is gory that doesn't even bother me or doesn't even register. So I do feel like there's that kind of thing going on too. But yeah, so I mean, there are just so many classic fucking scenes from this fucking shit. I mean, like I said, the whole scene of them in, like, Juno's office where they, like, pull their faces off, the whole, like, scene around the table with the Harry Belafonte song and the fucking shrimp hands coming out of the things and knocking everybody back and shit like that. It's just, I just still can't believe to this day, and this movie is, like, you know, 30 something years old now. I can't believe that this movie got made and that it was actually, like, a big success, because it really seems like one of those movies, like I said, kind of like The Frighteners. But The Frighteners was not really, didn't have, like, a lot of mainstream success at the time. And even now, it's still kind of like a cult classic, you know? Whereas Beetlejuice was immediately, it came out and everybody's like, oh yeah. And, like, everybody saw it. And then it immediately, like, became this huge cultural phenomenon. So much so, like I said, that they did, like, a 4-season cartoon show. Just a couple years ago, they started doing, like, there's a fucking Broadway musical of the shit. It's like everybody knows Beetlejuice. Like, if you wear a black and white striped suit and stick your hair up all crazy, everybody knows who the fuck that is. If you do quotes from it, everybody knows what that is.
The thing with The Frighteners was the timing. I mean, I saw it in the theater. I liked it, and the theater was just fucking empty. All right. And I remember telling people, I said, hey, man, I just saw a good movie. It's called The Frighteners. And they're like, oh, yeah, more of that. People were kind of spoiled with those kind of movies.
Yeah.
You know? The comedy horror type movies. There's a lot of that had been around for a while. And people kind of consider that to be kind of like old hat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like a tired genre. And I thought it was like just classic American cinema. Kind of like Back to the Future. But I think that's part of the reason why that movie didn't do well. They were kind of sick of those movies at that point.
Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's just interesting to me that, like, that, you know, then Beetlejuice came out. I mean, Frighteners came out later, I guess. That was 90s, right?
Yeah, Frighteners was kind of like the last of that all-American Steven Spielberg kind of a tone. Like, you know, something happened in American suburbia type of deal.
Yeah.
And it kind of had that feel, even though it was a dark slant on it, you know.
Yeah.
You know, actually, I'd put Frighteners above this movie. I know that this movie's a fucking classic. You know what I mean? It changed a lot of shit. But out of the two, I enjoyed Frighteners a lot better. That's just my person. That's my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I like The Frighteners too, but it's like this movie, like I said, this is probably easily in my top 10, top 20, something like that. I mean,
and there's two cuts of The Frighteners. There's two cuts of The Frighteners. I like the long cut of it. Yeah. The short cut is not quite as good, and that's the one most people see is the short cut.
Yeah.
I think it was the theatrical release. I like the director's cut of it.
Yeah.
My Blu-ray has them both. The director's cut's even better than the theatrical release. But like I said, just my opinion. I like that movie. That movie's got a lot of stuff in Frighteners. And I like the tone of that a little bit better than this one. Although I do understand why this one is important. It was an important movie for its time.
Well, and this one,
still good.
This one kind of like creates its whole world, and it creates a world that I don't think anyone had really seen before, at least no one in the mainstream, and kind of like brought you into it. Like I said, it was dark. It was about death. Like I said, they even made jokes about suicide. Look at like Miss Argentina or whoever it was that worked in the office, like in the afterlife. And, and she was telling them, she's like, oh, death is very personal. It's like, that's what happens when they die and they look like that. And then she said, if I'd known what I know now, I wouldn't have had my little accident. And she showed her wrists and she had slit her wrists. And this had like made, this was a reference to something that one of the living characters had said before, that it's like, I heard that if you commit suicide, that in the afterlife you become a civil servant. So it's like, so everything's kind of like reacting back to it. So the fact that they could put like such dark humor in there and still make it kind of family friendly, I guess. I mean, I guess for little kids it'd probably be kind of scary because there is like kind of some scary like imagery in it, I suppose. But the fact that they could strike that balance like so perfectly and make it more like charming and heartwarming, even while it was talking about death and suicide and, had like a lot of dark themes to it, is really like amazing that they were able to pull that off. I mean, if you'd have read the script, it's like, I feel like it shouldn't have worked. You know what I mean? But it's just everything. They had the right director, they had the right art director, they had, all the right actors. Like everybody in it is like completely perfect. I have to too, like give fucking props to Catherine O'Hara as, the stepmom, because she is fucking hilarious in this. She's hilarious in everything. But she's especially funny in this one as just like this bitchy like artist type that wants to like tear up all the shit. And I love how she does these kind of like total like meltdowns and then she just totally goes back to being calm again. It's like that just like fucking cracks me up so much, which I guess she did a little bit of that in Home Alone too. But yeah, so I would be very, very shocked if anybody out there had not seen Beetlejuice at this point. But if you haven't, what the fuck are you been doing? You really need to see it. It's just a delightful, delightful film. It just takes you on this whimsical adventure. I feel like the same way about this one that I feel about like Willy Wonka, like the original one, not like the Tim Burton remake, which was terrible. But it gives me that same like just sense of wonder. You know what I mean? Yeah. It has that same kind of like aesthetic to it, but still like with a dark underbelly that is, but like I said, it's heartwarming though. That's what's so cool about it. It's like, and particularly Lydia's character, who's like kind of the heart of the movie, and how she kind of like, she gets like the best of both worlds at the end, because at the end, they figure out like the living and the dead, they can live together. They can live in the same house. The Dietzes can have their crazy like modern New York shit on one floor, and the Maitlands can have their really nice antique stuff on the other floor, and Lydia can just go back and forth between them. And now she has like two sets of parents. One set is alive and one set is dead, and she's clearly like doing a lot better. And so I just think that's really like it's just like a cool message to the movie, and it was just like a cool look to it. And it's easily one of my favorite movies of all time, and I'm really glad we got to talk about it. Like I said, I'm not ripping off Oliver Harper. I didn't know that he was going to put up a retrospective on it, but go watch it, because he goes, his retrospectives are like really good, because he goes like way into like all the background stuff. He's like into the score. He talks about the video games that were based on it, because there were several that came out after. Oh, I have to say the score too, I used to have on cassette, and I used to play it all the time with the Danny Elfman score and then all the Harry Belafonte songs and everything. Yeah, I really
if you haven't seen this movie, go ahead and see it. If you've seen this movie but you haven't seen Frighteners, I want to give a shout out to Frighteners too. Frighteners is similar to this in a way. The tone is more Back to the Future, It has that tone. Imagine if Back to the Future was a paranormal thriller. Michael J. Fox plays a paranormal investigator who's a psychic, but he's kind of damaged. He's kind of a dark version of Marty McFly. And then weird shit happens. He's got a bunch of ghosts that work for him. It's a good flick. It's funny, though. And if you can get the long cut version, get that one. I think it's the better. It also has a guy from Reanimator. What was his name? Jeffrey Combs. Jeffrey Combs does a fantastic job in that movie playing a FBI agent. What was his name? Agent...
I can't remember.
Yeah. But that's also a great movie. I'd recommend either one of them.
Yeah, we reviewed that a while back.
Yeah, we reviewed it.
And I like that you mentioned Death Becomes Her too, because this one similar. Although Death Becomes Her was more adult oriented,
right?
Because that was kind of like about an adult love triangle, where this is kind of more about like a teenager, and then there's all this other. So this is a lot more like kid friendly.
Out of the ones that we mentioned, me personally, I'd put Frighteners at the top of the heap, just because I think it's a better story in terms of that. There's a lot of like paranormal stuff that happens in there that matches up with shit that I've seen in my real life. Fucking out of body experiences and near death experiences and weird poltergeist stuff. And kind of like the paranormal theme that it shows, I think that might be happening in another dimension to a certain extent. So that's one of the. I thought so. Personally, me seeing it in the theater with my background, I was tripping. I was like, they might know what they're talking about here because that kind of matches up with some of the shit that I saw. You know what I mean? So. I think that one was kind of educational. Or theoretically, it was educational. Maybe that some of that stuff might happen that way.
Whereas I think
they got Lee Ermey, the ghost of Lee Ermey, dressed as a fucking drill sergeant, in the cemetery, telling all the ghosts to fucking stay there to keep them contained. That was a weird angle. That some ghosts were keeping other ghosts in check, like law enforcement.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know if that happens, but. That might happen. Who knows? Ghosts might fucking police each other.
But like I said, I think the reason that I've always liked, Beetlejuice the better was just because I think the concept is a lot more creative. And like I said, I really, really like the idea of this kind of like bureaucratic afterlife. And there's all these rules, like with the handbook for the recently deceased. Yeah, and you have to like read this thing reads like stereo
instructions. I'm not saying it's not a great movie. It is a great. I'm not saying it's not a great movie. It is a great movie. It's a great movie.
Well, no, I'm just saying that I just find this.
It's not
one,
my favorite, but it is a great movie.
I just find this one a lot more like just the concept behind it. I find it a lot more like creative.
It's just a matter of taste.
I wish that I had thought of it actually, like the whole like world building that they did in this movie, and the fact that this movie is only like an hour and a half long. And they just built this whole entire like mythology about the afterlife.
I'm gonna say it's very Tim Burton-y.
It is, but like I said, this was before that was a thing. Yeah. That was, he'd only made one movie, which was not like, Tim Burton-y, really.
Tim Burton-y,
this was his first,
it's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing.
No, it's not.
Tim Burton-y is not a bad thing. It's just, he just has he has a signature that you can really see.
Which there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. I mean, like I said.
He puts his fingerprints on it.
It's just that.
It's him telling the story.
Yeah.
I always do.
Yeah, you always can tell like a Tim Burton
except with that first one. I didn't know the Pee-wee's Adventure was a Burton
Now,
movie.
I haven't seen that for a long time.
Yeah, if I went back and looked at it now, I could probably see it.
You would probably pick up on some shit. Because as I said, he had made short films where it's like he made Frankenweenie, which was kind of like, like a little black and white, like animated, like an old monster movie, like a Frankenstein movie. So it was kind of like that. So you could tell that he had those kind of like predilections already. But this one was the first one where it seemed like his style just, emerged, like came out like fully formed.
Yeah.
Like in this movie, this was like all his shit that he liked.
Yeah.
And, from there, it seems like, subsequent movies, other than Batman, I mean, Batman was kind of Tim Burton-y, but since that was already a property that existed, he couldn't really go too crazy with it. He could put like his stamp on it, but I feel like Beetlejuice was just him. He's like, this is all the stuff I like, and I'm going to put it all in one movie. You know what I mean? Because he didn't have any other like intellectual property.
Another really good one that he did, and I forgot to mention it, was Sweeney Todd. I really liked Sweeney Todd.
I did as well.
I like that one.
I didn't. You know what? I saw it in the theater when it first came out. And I didn't love it the first time that I saw it.
You got to see it a couple times.
But the second time I saw it, I liked it a lot better.
I liked the music in it. I liked the acting. And the story was good.
Yeah. Whereas I think Beetlejuice, I just loved it immediately because it was just so delightful. Yeah. And you know, as I said, I was 16 at the time, you know, really into goth and everything. And I just thought it was so cool, like seeing that aesthetic on the big screen and like having people like respond to it. Like it wasn't, you know what I mean? So that was the first time I'd ever seen that. And it was kind of mind blowing. Yeah. So for that reason alone, and it's just funny that I saw the trailer. I'm pretty sure that I was at Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which is also another great movie. Man, we should do that one of these days.
Yeah.
I specifically remember going to see that because I think I was with some of my friends, and then I think my parents were there too because they took like my younger siblings to see it, but they were like sitting farther up the aisle.
I didn't really like that one.
Oh, I love that movie.
Yeah, I didn't like that one. I didn't like Dick Tracy. Remember Dick Tracy?
Well, I didn't like Dick Tracy either.
I kind of...
Who Framed Roger Rabbit is totally different than Dick Tracy. It's totally not the same.
It all kind of came out around the same time from what I remember, and I didn't like those movies.
Dick Tracy, I think, came out a couple years later. Who Framed Roger Rabbit came out in 88, the same year that this came out. And this was actually... It's weird because Who Framed Roger Rabbit was also based on a much darker book. But, you know, they kind of made it a little bit more family-friendly. Although I will say... that I distinctly remember when I went to see Who Framed Roger Rabbit, my parents were there, and my youngest brother, who I believe was about 2 at the time, when the judge like dips that little shoe like in the dip and he's like screaming and stuff, my little brother screamed and ran out of the theater, and my parents had to go and chase him like with his little diaper. He was like running like, oh my god, he could not handle it. And I still remember like how upsetting that scene was for him. I mean, must have been pretty upsetting for a 2-year-old. But yeah, seriously, if you haven't seen Beetlejuice, like I said, what the fuck is wrong with you? Everyone needs to see it. Even if you don't like Tim Burton, it's still like a delightful fucking movie. So yeah, go see it right now. And that'll do it for this movie review, and we will see you on the next one. Bye.